Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Evan by Toni Denise, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Chapter 1, Evan. Well, Evan, are you excited? Luke joked. About, Evan asked, confused. It's your turn to do the blind dates, Luke laughed. Evan swallowed. He wanted a woman to spend his life with, but was he ready for blind dates? A few months ago, he'd been the one to come up with the idea for all of them to take turns picking blind dates for each other, one at a time. These dates were all to play out at a restaurant where he was a silent partner of the blind date. This restaurant was different from any other one. You met your date in the dark, and you didn't get to find out who your date was until the end, and only if both people agreed. It was a genius idea that he'd immediately backed and believed would do well. So far it had. It was starting to get stuffy in here. He looked around Cade's game room as he pulled on his tie. He was less worried about the dates themselves and more worried about if it didn't work. Hello, Luke waved his hand in Evan's face. He pushed it away. What? Evan snapped. I think you don't want to do this, Cade commented. This was all your idea. You can't back out. I wouldn't complain if you did, Jake told him. Jake had gone first. After a bout of run dates, the worst being Luke's pick, he'd finally found a good date in Lauren, who happened to be Cade's secretary. You're just saying that because it went well for you, Luke frowned. Why do you care? Evan turned to Luke. Because he has some stupid chick picked out for you already. Riker tossed his own thoughts through it with a wave of his tattooed hand. Evan ran a hand through his thick, dark hair. He had to give it a try. He wouldn't know if it would help him find someone unless he tried, and it had worked out well for Jake. Plus, if his friend's picks were bad, he could use the app to match with someone first based on the test you had to take. I'm not backing out. He was going to pull that constricting blue tie off now, though. Don't let them push you into shit, Jake told him. I'm not, he defended. Fucking hell, whose turn is it? The poker game had come to a halt when Luke had asked that question. They played every Friday night, though their group was getting smaller lately with Owen and Jake in serious relationships. Yours, his friends yelled. It's been yours ever since Luke tried and succeeded to distract you. Cade rolled his eyes and gestured to the cards on the table. You might as well fold. You aren't even paying attention. Whatever. Evan took a look around the table and realized Cade was right. He tossed his cards face down on the table and stood. He ignored the laughter from everyone as he walked off to the bathroom. Closing the door behind him, Evan leaned forward towards the mirror, bracing himself with his hands on the counter. He had no reason to be this nervous over a few dates. Hell, it wasn't like he'd been doing a good job for himself in that department anyway. He sighed and stood straight, looking at himself in the mirror. He needed to get it together. He turned on the cold water and splashed some on his face before grabbing the towel off the rack and wiping his hands and face off. One more deep breath and he was ready to go back to the game. No doubt he'd lost plenty of chips to Luke just then. He needed to get his head back in the game and take them back. He pulled the door open, only to find Jake on the other side. What? Need to piss, he shrugged. Look, don't let them get to you. Your dates will be fine. Well, some might. Luke's an asshole. But that comes from being young and dumb. Yeah. He stepped out of the bathroom and allowed Jake to pass him by. The man smiled all the time now and seemed happier than he ever had before. Not that Jake had ever been much of anything else, but it was a different kind of happy. The kind that came from knowing your other half was waiting for you at home. Luke, on the other hand, was an asshole. He was the youngest of the group and was still living the high life that came from being a young, attractive man with entirely too much money. His friend group, Cade, Evan, Jake, Luke, Owen, and Riker, were all billionaires from different businesses. It was nice to have money, but dating was a challenge when you were looking for something real. Sometimes women would fool them into believing they were sincere, but in the end, they only cared about money. You're back. You want in, or are you going to sit the rest of the game night out while you contemplate your life choices? Luke called out. Deal me in. He took a seat and tried to focus on the cards being dealt. I'm out. Jake took his jacket off the back of the chair he had been in moments before. Luke made a sound like a cracking whip. Have a good night, man, Cade told him. Yep, Riker said, always the quiet one of the bunch. Yeah, Jake waved Luke off before letting himself out. He's so whipped. He and Owen both, Luke mused aloud. You'll want that one day, Evan told him. Bullshit. All of you old men can have the wife, picket fence, and 2.5 kids. I'll stick with the good sex with multiple women at the same time, he added with a wink. Riker laughed. Your dick's gonna fall off, dude. What the fuck ever. Luke waved him off and tossed in more chips. I'll raise. Call. Riker stared him down. Evan took a look at the 2 cards in front of him and called as well. Cade called and Riker dealt the last face-up card on the table. Evan had a good hand and did his best not to shift in his seat and tip his hand. It wasn't that any real money was being exchanged tonight, but he didn't want to lose either. Luke smiled. Raise. He tossed several chips in again. Fold. Riker tossed his cards down and picked up his beer. Call. Evan threw in enough chips to meet Luke's bet. Fold. Cade leaned back in his chair and stretched. Luke grinned and turned those cards over. 2 pair with kings high. He leaned forward to rake in the chips. Not so fast. Evan turned his own 2 cards over, revealing a flush. He'd won, and he pulled all the chips his way. Luke gaped. How? I wasn't busy worrying about getting laid, Evan told him as he stacked his chips. Cade stood and walked toward the fridge. Anyone need a beer? They all said they did as Riker shuffled the cards for the next hand. Cade came back with a bottle for each of them and passed the bottle opener around. Who's going first for Evan? Cade asked and took a swig of his beer. I am. Luke was so matter-of-fact, anyone would have thought they'd already agreed on it. Absolutely not, Evan told him. What, you want him to go? He pointed at Riker. Evan looked from Luke to Riker before laughing. Anything is better than you. Hopefully someone picks me a good date and then I won't have to get to suffer your punishment. That's shit. You're just scared. Luke folded his arms down and leaned back, staring Evan down. Are we 12? You're going to try call me a chicken, so I agree to let you go first while defending my manhood? Evan shook his head. Hate to break it to you, kid. I'm not that dumb. Does anyone have a date in mind? Luke asked. Cade shook his head. I think Jake does. Well, he's not here. Luke turned to Riker and arched an eyebrow, waiting for his answer. Of course not, Riker answered. See, that means I have to go first because I'm the only one ready, Luke told him. Evan took a long pull of his beer while he contemplated the implication of letting Luke go first. His date for Jake was bad, a touchy-feely woman with one thing on her mind. Well, probably 2, money and sex. Disgusted with what he was about to do, Evan just stopped himself from slapping the rest of the beer back. Fine, you can go first. Yes, Luke pumped one arm in excitement. God, you're such a kid. Evan shook his head and threw back the rest of his beer. One more hand was played, and Evan once again took the pot from Luke, who thought he'd won. Luke whined when everyone agreed to call it a night. Come on, I deserve a chance to win my chips back. Luke pressed everyone for another hand. Riker came around the table and smacked him on the shoulder. Get a hold of yourself. It's not even real money. I don't like to lose, Luke gritted out. Then stop doing it, Riker told him. Luke pulled his shoulder out of Riker's grasp. Shut up. It was sound advice, Cade teased. Luke threw a look at Cade, and he looked so ridiculous that Evan couldn't hold back his laughter. Fuck all of you, Luke called out. He headed for the door and yanked it open before slamming it behind him. All 3 men were left laughing as they finished cleaning up. One day he'll wake up and realize there's more to life than bimbos, Cade assured everyone. His dick is going to fall off, Riker said again. Lately, that was the only thing Riker ever said about Luke. Luke annoyed the shit out of Riker, but for some unknown reason, he had decided that Riker was his mentor, but did the opposite of every piece of advice Riker had ever given him. It was a weird dynamic. You better go get your rest, Luke. Luke will have that date set up in no time for you, and if she's anything like the one he picked for Jake, you're going to need to be well rested. Cade tossed the empty bottles in the trash. Neither of you could have come up with a date? You both backed out on me. Evan stared down his friends. Oh, no, I've done my part already, Cade said. You didn't do shit. Everyone knows Catherine picked for you, Evan told him. I let her. Cade put both hands up as though he'd done his part by letting Catherine pick. Maybe we should add her to the party. She already knows about it, and then you'll have to actually make your own pick. Evan laughed at Riker's shocked face. It was no secret that Catherine had a thing for Riker. What he didn't understand was why Riker never admitted to anyone that he wanted Catherine too. It was obvious to anyone in a room with both of them for more than 5 minutes. If you don't think she won't take 2 turns, then you don't know my sister at all. Cade brushed off the table and walked back to the fridge. Are either of you staying the night? He asked. Not me. I've got shit to do this weekend. I'm out, Riker said before heading to the door and letting himself out. I think my life is about to get real interesting, so I'm going to head home tonight and enjoy the last bit of peace I can before Luke sets me up on a date with someone who will probably turn out to be a fucking escort or some shit, Evan told him, walking toward the door. Might not want to say that anywhere near Luke. He'd probably do it and consider it a good business investment because Riker told him not to, Cade teased. Don't say a fucking word, Evan threatened and opened the door. Have a good night, Cade called out. Yeah, you too, Evan replied. He headed home to get ready for the weekend and to contemplate the person that Luke might pick out for him. It seemed a lot was about to happen in his life, but only time would tell if it would be good news or not.